Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. Globalist elites have finally reached the goal they were after for decades, and that is to drive a wedge between Germany and Russia. Especially US coastal elites were after this for a very long time, and they were pushing for that so far without much luck. But right now, with the current situation we have in the Ukraine, this has changed. Germany has now started to seriously support the Ukraine in this war. That they donated 5,000 helmets before was a bit of a joke. No, they actually did that. It was just a joke and not real support. But now they gave green light for Estonia and the Netherlands to ship equipment that was basically ours to Ukraine. And also we from Germany, we will directly deliver 1,000 RPGs, no pun intended, and 500 Stingers. Those are short-range ground-to-air air defense missiles. And also on the economic sanctions front, it becomes more serious right now. In addition to delaying the start of the gas flow from Nord Stream 2 or through Nord Stream 2 even longer right now, or outright putting a halt to the whole thing, Berlin has signaled to change their position on the exclusion of Russia from the SWIFT program. Luxembourg and Germany were the only remaining EU countries that were skeptical about this step, but now they signaled that they would vote in favor of excluding Russia from SWIFT, and tomorrow there should be a video conference where they will have a vote on that, I think. For those of you who don't know, SWIFT stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. It is in Belgium, and it is an organization in which 11,000 banks are linked together in order to facilitate international payment streams. And it is very obvious now why that would be relevant for Russia and Europe and the US, for example. It is of course that Russia is a big exporter of oil and natural gas. And that means they cannot sell that anymore practically because they're no longer in the payment system. That would mean that Germany could no longer get oil and gas from Russia, and I'm really curious, if the US will also stop buying this oil that they get right now from Russia and what that means for gas prices in the US. So I'm really curious if the US will not find a loophole to still somehow get oil from Russia during all this, because their gas prices will go up because the push for energy independence that former President Trump undertook, that is no longer a thing under Biden, as I've seen. Of course, our electricity prices and our heating costs and our gasoline prices, they will surge much more in Germany, but we're used to that. US Americans, not so much. So this is how Germany changed its position already, and also in the media, if you read some articles here and there, you see that even a party like Die Linke or the SPD that used to be very, very Russia friendly, I reported in a previous video, for example, about Manuela Schwesig, who is the governor in one of our northern states, where the pipeline Nord Stream 2 is actually ending in Germany, where the gas is then delivered. And they were traditionally very, very pro-Putin, very pro-Russian. For example, our former Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, he is really best buddies with him, and he's also a lobbyist, and he should even be, I think, working for Gazprom, the state-owned Russian gas company. And he's a social democrat as well, of course. A lot of these people have now positioned themselves pro-Ukrainian and against Russia, and even the party Die Linke, which is a political party that is basically still the Socialist Communist Unity Party from Eastern Germany after a couple of name changes, but it is still basically the same party. Even those politicians that are, surprise, always very Russian, they have now spoken out against Putin. And this lets me get a little bit suspicious about something that is brewing here, but I will say that I will think a little bit more about that, and I will make a video in the near future, I guess, about my suspicions here. I just want to say that much, that a lot of the things that we see and read right now are purely theater, in my opinion. They're not real. Maybe they have been planned beforehand, but I'm not so sure about that. But it's really just theater and propaganda. And I don't mean the obvious propaganda that we see on both sides right now, where they claim that someone surrendered, or they didn't surrender, or they are heroes, or we have so many victims, or we hit that many planes. I mean, if these reports are wrong, and I'm sure a lot of them are wrong, made up or exaggerated, then that is obvious propaganda. Or, for example, they're telling a story about an attack or something, and then they show a picture that was like from 2018, for example. This is obvious propaganda. I'm not talking about this right now. It is very clear that there is obvious propaganda in these times at war, and they always say that the truth is the first victim of war. Yeah, I thought it was women. No, I'm not talking about this now. I'm not talking about obvious propaganda. I'm talking about something deeper and more, well, stronger and deeper probably. Anyway, so those were the facts, those were the reactions in Germany that you see. So to sum up once more, economic sanctions are becoming serious now. If we exclude Russia from the SWIFT system, that is really a big deal. That is a real sanction that would hurt Russia, but it would also hurt Germany and other Europeans and the US, and I'm really curious about that. I want to see that with my own eyes. And also, we're sending now real equipment that they can actually use. Well, of course, you can use helmets, but you know what I'm saying, right? RPGs and stingers, that's real stuff that they can actually use. And that means that Germany has officially chosen sides now, and they're delivering war materials to the adversary of Russia, to the Ukraine right now. That means we have picked a side. So those were the facts, and now my opinion on this. I think it is a bad decision just right away. I think Germany should stay neutral. The Ukraine is not a NATO country, it's not an EU country. It is a US satellite state. It is somewhat of a buffer state, sure, a buffer state of the biggest NATO member. But it is not our buffer state. And to be very honest, it is my opinion that had it not been for the fact that we are still an occupied territory and we ourselves are a satellite state of the US, then we would have never made this decision, because it is not in the German interest. But Germany is not allowed to even formulate its own interest. We're not allowed to have an interest. We are just allowed to do whatever the US is telling us, because we are a vassal state with a puppet regime. If you look at Germany and you think, what would be the geopolitical goal of Germany, then this is not it. This is what the US want us to do, not what is in our own best interest. And for all you guys that allowed themselves to get all soft and mushy inside when you read all this Western propaganda and you watched your cable news, let me ask you this question. What was the German response anytime the US choose to just, invade a country or bomb some people? What was the German reaction? Did we ask them to be removed from the SWIFT program, or did we deliver weapons to the enemies of the United States? Did we ask the current or then current US president to be put on trial at the International Court for Human Rights? No, of course not. Because once again, we are a vassal state, and this is not whataboutism, this is the very same situation, and it occurred dozens of times in the last decades, or well, since World War II, let's say, and we never did anything about it. And there were never any sanctions against a Western country. Also France and Italy, when they did something in Northern Africa, nobody cared. There were no sanctions, nothing, not even the suggestion of it. And now, the moment Russia is doing something, sanctions. And what kind of sanctions? Sanctions that hurt us the most and which are completely against our interests. And no, I'm not complaining, I'm not surprised, this just goes to show one more time, and if anybody still had doubts about that, it goes to show that Germany is a satellite state with a puppet regime. just like the Ukraine. Or you might also think about all these military misadventures that the great allies of the US are conducting in the Middle East. Some of them are countries and some are just thugs and gangs. And yes, they are funded by Western countries, first and foremost by the United States, and nobody cares about that. There are no sanctions. Do you think that nobody is suffering in these conflicts? Do you think they are lesser people or something? They also have families. There are also victims there. But there is one thing that you cannot do with these conflicts. You cannot make Europe pay. And you cannot drive a wedge between Central Europeans and Eastern Europeans. And that is the only reason why we see this selective outrage right now. In other conflicts that occurred in the last decades, the reaction and the media coverage and all these things, it didn't even come close to what we're seeing right now. This is orchestrated selective outrage. Alright, that is at least my opinion on these recent developments, especially when it comes to Germany from the German perspective. That is how I see it at least. Let me know what you think about in the comments down below. Alright, a little bit good news from my side. I just exceeded 10,000 subscribers on BitChute, a very nice little milestone, and I almost have 2,000 on Odyssey now. Check me out on other social media platforms too, or choose the one that fits best for you. Big shout out and thank you to all my supporters and my subscribers. Share my videos if you wanna support my work, or you can also support me via Patreon or Subscribestar. Thank you for making it until the end. Enjoy the rest of your day. Servus, Kameraden.